All right, we call this method, because lack of a better term, we call it the 120, 180 thing. All right, and what it is, rather than, again, taking the Cessna, the slow guy, whoever it is, and vectoring him around the outer marker and waiting for a hole, if I knew a more efficient way of bringing him in, I could conceivably bring him into the airport with a whole bunch of 180 knotters out there, all over the downwinds and coming in on base leg. If I knew what the math of it was, I didn't have to sit and figure it so much. So what I've done with this method is already done the math for you. All you have to know is tied at 10, 1 mile behind at 7, 2 miles behind at 4. Notice that every 3 miles, you're going to gain a mile of separation at these speeds. You can see that right there, 3 miles a minute, 2 miles a minute, okay? Well, how did we figure that? All right, let's start with the beginning. A guy going 120 will fly 12 miles in the same time that a guy doing 180 will fly 18. So what I've done is I've just cut that in half, and I went, okay, he'll fly 6 when he flies 9. There's my 3 mile separation I'm looking for. So if I tie them up 9 miles out from the outer marker, I'm going to have my 3 miles by the outer marker. The problem with that is, on an IFR day, at the airport that I work at, the MVA is 3,100 feet. And the glide slope is 3,100. The MVA is 2,100. So my jet goes at 2,100. My little guy at 31, that's as low as he can go. And I can't clear him until I get my 3 miles. If I waited till the outer marker to get the 3 miles, I would be above the glide slope. So rather than being tied at 9, we just tie at 10. And that is from the outer marker, okay? Let me show you the beauty of doing this method. A lot of people don't like to have that Cessna this far out here, and I understand that, okay? This method will also work with the Cessna. Let's see him do it real quick. On a downwind, 120 knots. Here comes my 180 knotter. Up here cleared for the approach. And I've got a 180 knotter here. I got a 180 knotter here. Just to prove that you can do this, no matter how busy you are. And we'll put another 180 knotter, what the heck, over here. All right? Most people would take this Cessna right now and do this with them. And God knows we know what happens then. Especially if you forget about them. If I can't be tied out here, there's 2 ways to do this method. I can either angle him up toward the final and shoot for 1 mile behind at 7. Let me write it over here again out of the way. Tied at 10, 1 at 7. Tied at 10, 1 at 7, 2 at 4. That's all you got to know. 60 knot difference, 180 and less. Okay? They turn into a headwind, 30 knots of wind. This guy goes to 150, he goes to 90. This method will still work. The more headwind, the better. You actually can tie them up even a little closer. But let's just stick with this because this is close enough without doing a lot of math. Tied at 10, 1 at 7, 2 at 4. So I angle him up to the final. And I want to be, when the fast guy's 7 miles out, 2, 4, 6, 7, I want to be 1 mile behind. Boom, bring him in. What if he's 4 miles out? I want to be 2 miles behind. This tells you exactly when to base this guy without guessing, which I won't accuse people of doing. But you do not have to be tied out here at 10 miles, okay? How about this? How about if the Cessna is 5 miles out from the airport and 5 miles over, right? I'm sorry, from the outer marker, my bus. 5 miles and 5 miles out. There's my 10 miles. There's my tied at 10. Remember, it's from the outer marker, not the airport. So, again, this tells me right when to bring them in there. I don't have to do the angling thing and create more vectors and more work. In this case, if you recognize that you've got 10 flying miles, go ahead and base and go to the lowest altitude you can. You're tied with this guy right there. So in that case, again, you don't have to take the Cessna way out here if you don't want to. All right, now what do we do? Questions on that, Al? Any of that so far? Remember now, this is from the outer marker.
Yes.
I made the mistake at first of measuring from the airport. What do we do about these next 180 knotters, right? That's the problem then. All you got to do is build you about a 12-mile hole. Okay? As long as we're at 180 and 120, a 12-mile hole works great. All right? For every 10 knots that you're less than 120, you're going to want to add about a mile. So if let's say you're at 90 knots and you're trying to do this maneuver, you want to build you about a 15-mile hole. And that's to start with. That'll put you right in the ballpark. What do I mean by 12, 15-mile hole? I'm talking about between the 280 knotters. You're going to do the C to A technique or whatever you want to call it, gap building. You're going to build you about a 12 to 15-mile hole. The little guy's going to be on top of the first one, and he's going to be backing into the hole. Once you get the second 180 knotter up here and you clear him for the approach, you're going to want to use my other method that we just talked about to make sure that you got your good spacing behind the Cessna. Okay? But if you'll just remember 12 is the key between the 180 knotters. And for every 10 knots that I'm less than 120, I need to add a mile. You'll be right there in the ballpark. And now you're saving a lot of transmissions. You're not making a whole lot of extra work. It's the most efficient way to do it. And you actually can get this Cessna in there. Think of it this way. If I have a 3-airplane sequence that are 180 knots, I need 8 miles. If they're all, 4 to get 3 on the separation, I need 8 miles, right? All I'm doing is making a 12-mile hole. And I'm getting that Cessna in there. I'm only sacrificing one slot to get that Cessna in there to the airport. Anything questions on that, Al? Do you think that I've left off?
It takes patience. It takes patience to wait for it. And you have to have your altitudes in there.
There we go.